Hi, I'm Dr. Pat McShane, and welcome to Women's Healthspan News and Views. Today, I'd like to talk about drinking alcohol, and I'm calling it Thinking About Drinking. And that's pretty much what I have been doing in the last year, as I have made a very conscious effort to improve my own health span, which is the amount of time that I'm still on this planet with good health. That's what we're trying to achieve. And what can we personally do about that? Um, a little personal story. We've had coronary artery disease in my family, and I have some of that, and also alcoholism in my family. So I was pretty mindful of how much alcohol I've been drinking through my whole life. But after I started working less, it's a lot easier to just have an extra glass of wine. Wine is my preferred beverage of choice. And it just kind of creeps up on you. And I guess I'm not alone. There seems to be an increase in alcohol use among senior men and women in the United States and probably elsewhere. And I think the pandemic had part to do with this as well, since many of us were not as involved in certain activities as we had been before. Um, and there's no question about the severe health impact of heavy alcohol use. And I'm going to put in the show notes below what is considered light, moderate, and heavy alcohol use. But people who drink, women who drink 3 drinks a day on average, and that could be a weekend where you just drink continually, or 3 drinks pretty much every day. That's considered heavy alcohol use. And the consequences of this clinically on one's health are enormous. I'm sure you're familiar with many of them. Um, Liver disease comes to mind immediately, various kinds of cancers. It worsens people's blood pressure. It gives you heart arrhythmias, irregular heartbeat. Just your heart may not contract as well. And so on. So it's not good for your gut, on and on and on. The main one also is neurodegenerative diseases. It's not good for your bones, and it's terrible for your mental illness. Depression is the most common one of those. So I'm not really thinking that most of you in my audience today are really needing to hear that heavy alcohol use is not good for you. But what I found interesting was the data out there about light to moderate alcohol use in older women. And I'm going to emphasize older women here because it turns out that what we can get away with in our 20s, 30s, 40s is different metabolically than what happens as we get older. One thing is our muscle mass tends to be lower than younger people, and our alcohol levels in our bloodstream are higher, therefore, because they're not distributed into the muscle mass as quickly. And the 2 beers or 2 margaritas that you might have tolerated when you were in your 30s, in your 50s, 60s, 70s can be much more impactful on you. Your blood alcohol level is higher. Your liver slows down a little bit as well, and you're not metabolizing this alcohol quite the same. And that can be a major factor, as well as how quickly you clear the alcohol that you drink. Obviously, if you're eating at the same time as drinking, that does slow down the absorption of alcohol dramatically. And if you're trying not to have too much in your bloodstream, that's a very good condition to drink alcohol in. Additionally, older folks are more likely to be on medications that may impact on the effect of alcohol. And there's a long list of them. I won't go into them here, but sometimes on your medication bottle, it will say, don't take this with alcohol. That's certainly to be heeded. And other medications that you may not think are particularly impactful may change your metabolic rate of alcohol excretion. So just be mindful of that. Additionally, a lot of us in our older years are struggling with our vision a little bit more, with our hearing a little bit more. Our reflex times are down. So the same amount of blood alcohol that we could tolerate in our earlier years might become dangerous for us as we get older. We're just not going to respond as quickly. And the data do show that there's higher rates of car accidents and falls and just general injuries in older folks who have alcohol in their blood system. And none of this information was a big surprise to me when I started doing the research, but there was a major study that came out almost a year ago now out of the British health system. And it's called the UK Biobank. And I'm going to reference a little thing on this in the show notes below. But they looked at the alcohol use experience of, I think it was 36,000 people, about half men, half women, reportedly what the person told them that they had been drinking over time, and looked at their brain with special imaging. And this is pretty sophisticated stuff and isn't readily available. And many of the studies that had been published about light alcohol intake prior to this study were from much, much smaller numbers, and very few of them had the sophisticated imaging studies that this British study had. What they found is that even 1 to 7 drinks a week, which was their definition of light alcohol intake rather, what measurably diminished several different aspects of their brain imaging, both the gray matter, which was the neurons, the actual cell bodies in the brain, the overall brain volume, and also the white matter, which is the connections between the neurons. That's what you see on the imaging. And it was in certain areas of the brain a little bit more, but it was pretty much global. And this isn't a real shocker because we know that alcohol readily impacts our brain. And in fact, that's probably why many of us drink alcohol, because it has a very quick impact on our brain functioning. Alcohol is readily absorbed by the brain, and it's going to go to all the nervous system tissues as well. So it wasn't a big shock to find that it did go to all the different areas of the brain, both the cell bodies and the connections between the neurons. And that's something that we feel when we drink alcohol. Certain of our functions are inhibited quite dramatically if we drink a fair amount, and almost immediately. The clinical impact of these findings is a little bit unclear. No one was saying that this leads to X, Y, or Z impact in the individuals who drink lightly, but it was equivalent to about 2 years of aging. As we age, our brain volumes and the amount of gray matter and white matter diminish, and drinking a little bit of alcohol did have the same impact on the brain image as 2 years of aging. So that's quite significant. And it was both in men and women. The other thing that I found when I was looking this up was the impact of alcohol on skin, specifically on our faces. And this is something that many of us care about. I certainly care about it. And again, there was a pretty good study not too long ago that certainly noted the heavy alcohol users' amount of extra blood vessels in their skin and wrinkles and various changes in the skin pattern. But again, even people who drink lightly had extra puffiness under their eyes and loss of volume of the midface here, which is, pretty normal for aging, but who needs to accelerate that? So I hope that this kind of information is something that you might want to take a look at. And I've put, as I said, some interesting references down in the notes below about how much alcohol equals light, moderate, and heavy drinking. And then the reference about the brain changes that I just described. And I suggest that if you need a to-do around this topic, that you take a good note of how much you actually are drinking. If this kind of information is something that might help you to move in a certain direction. It certainly has helped me to move in the direction of greatly diminishing my alcohol intake. I'm not saying that I've totally stopped drinking, but it makes me think quite seriously before taking that glass of wine. So hopefully this was good information for you. And if you are interested in more of this, please subscribe. And if there's certain topics that you would like to hear more about, please put those in the comments, which I am always happy to see. So thanks again for joining me.